Hi, this is Irving Steele, your host of Local Issues, and today we have a really exciting guest here who just loves to talk about trash more than anything else, and it's a really pertinent issue right now, currently in the state of Connecticut, that many of the leaders throughout the state are trying to grapple with this and find innovative solutions. So our guest today is Dave from the Southeastern Connecticut Regional Resources Recovery Authority. So welcome, Dave. How are you?
Thank you. Yeah, we call it SCRRRA.
SCRRRA.
It's a lot shorter.
A little bit easier to use that than that.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, thanks for having me.
Of course. So for people who don't know so much about SCRRRA, could you kind of explain, introduce what is the authority?
Sure. So SCRRRA is a regional waste authority that was created back in the 1980s to bond the waste-to-energy facility that is in Preston, Connecticut. So that was the technology at the time. The state had decided to close all the municipal landfills and move towards waste-to-energy facilities. So we were the authority that bonded that facility. After it was built, we actually were able to take some of the proceeds from that bonding and invest it in a lot of different ways. So now, in addition to holding the contract for waste disposal, we also hold the contract for all curbside recycling. We do 9 hazardous waste collections a year. We have a large wood grinder that grinds all of the brush and wood that's brought into the transfer stations. And we handle most of the materials that come through to the 12 town transfer stations. We hold all of those contracts, and that's what we do. So originally we built the waste-to-energy plant, and now we spend all of our time trying not to send anything there.
Nice. And I think it's a really awesome example, like you mentioned, of these 12 towns kind of coming together in 1984 to realize that maybe joining forces, sharing different resources, that together they could achieve a lot more than just trying to do things on their own.
Yes, it's a pretty good example. Connecticut really doesn't have what you would consider county governments, but in other states around the country, this is kind of what a county would do. So you have, in our case, 12 towns, and it is successful. We generate about 135,000 tons of trash a year. And that's significant. So that gives us an advantage when we negotiate contracts, and it helps us, spread the workload out and get a lot done.
And one thing that people always try and maybe fight against these things is saying, hey, maybe this is increasing costs or this is increasing taxes and things like that. But interesting to note for SCRRRA that you are able to operate through your own revenues to fund your operations. Is that right?
That is true. When the facility was bonded, part of the indenture was a contract for the sale of the electricity the plant produced. It was very favorable for us, and unlike a lot of entities, when those receipts started to come in, we actually invested the funds. So that allows us to not only manage the different things that we do, but we actually subsidize the cost of trash. So in the state right now, a ton of trash going to waste-to-energy facility could be anywhere from $100 to $130 per ton. In our case, we actually are paying in the low to mid 70s because of a very good contract, and because we have the ability to subsidize, we charge the towns less than it costs for the disposal of the trash, and we provide the recycling, the wood grinding, the hazardous waste collections, all those other things at no additional cost. And it also includes our administrative expenses. So the organization itself is not paid for through taxes. The taxes that are part of it would pay part of the amount of the trash that's disposed of.
Mm-hmm. And it's such an important issue right now for the state of Connecticut that right before we started, we were talking about the amount of trash that the whole state produces. And we think maybe one family or one company here, one family there, it's a little bit of trash. But all together, according to some research recently, it's about 3.5 million tons a year in the state of Connecticut. and I'm sure these numbers are going up astronomically every single year. And then on top of that, Connecticut is running out of space. So what do we ship? Something like 40% of this trash out of state right now? We want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, so as I said, we were formed back in the 80s. At that time, as I said, the state had actually mandated the closure of all municipal landfills. So in addition to the Preston facility, there were a number of other facilities built around the state. And between the early 80s to the mid 90s, they built out the waste energy infrastructure and they stopped. And they stopped still only handling about 80% of the volume, the balance of which was sent out of state. Several years ago, the second largest facility, the MidCon facility in Hartford, closed. It was an old coal facility that had been converted for trash, so it was very antiquated, and that closed. And now, to your point, 40% or 850,000 tons of trash are sent out of state, mostly by truck, to places like Pennsylvania and Ohio. So it's very expensive, both economically and environmentally.
I'm really curious that's a lot of trash that we're shipping out. Where do these costs go? Is it the taxpayer? Is it our government? Do you have any rough idea of who's kind of paying for all this?
Well, it always goes back to the taxpayer, one way or another, whether they're paying for it directly or they're paying it through the taxes. It always ends up going back to the resident. In our case, there are all different methods of managing this. There are several communities, 4 or 5 in our region, that have their own trucks and pick up the waste with town employees and take it up to the facility on our contract. There are other towns that contract through the tax base a hauler to come in and make the collection. And there are a number of other towns that just do it by what we call subscription, which is where the hauler would contract directly with the homeowner, and it's outside the taxes. So depending on the town you're in, it's done differently. But I assure you, at the end of the day, it's the taxpayer that foots the bill one way or another.
And some people say that recycling is kind of the solution to all this, that you can throw anything into the recycling bin and that takes care of all the trash. And what do you think about people who kind of come up with that as a solution?
Well, it's actually the solution du jour, if you will, for the state. When Hartford closed, there was a series of meetings and decisions were made, and the state's position was we're going to recycle our way out of this. I shouldn't say just that. It's a matter of reducing, reusing, and recycling our way out of it. We tend to forget the 3 R's, the first two, reduce and reuse. But yeah, they wanted to enhance what we recycle, the way we recycle. The problem with all of this is that to do it in any volume, it requires infrastructure, and we don't have that infrastructure, and finding the money and the places to do that isn't easy. So we've been doing curbside recycling since the early 90s. It used to be a dual stream where you do paper in cardboard one week, cans and bottles another week. In the mid 90s, we switched that to a single stream. And that's been effective, but it's also pretty much run its course as far as volumes. So we had to get a little more creative and look outside of that traditional way of recycling. And if we want to move the needle on that 850,000 tons that we need to make up for. So
yeah, so we have to come up with some innovative solutions. And before we jump into some of the innovative solutions that you're working on, something that our viewers are really interested in is some of the most common things that people throw into the recycling bins that actually aren't able to be recycled. Do you have any ideas on that?
Oh, yeah, I do have some thoughts there. So I do a fair amount of speaking about recycling, and usually the first thing that I tell people is that when you look at recycling and an item for recycling, what you're looking at is essentially a raw material for remanufacture. That's what recycling is. You're taking an object, and you're going to take it and you're going to remake it either back into that object, like a water bottle into a water bottle, or you could take that water bottle and make it into a park bench, or you could turn it into building materials. There are a number of ways that you can recycle. But to do that, the material, in those cases, the plastic itself, has to be the right kind of plastic. It has to be clean, or the process doesn't work. So when I talk about recycling, what we really focus on are the basic items to recycle. Food grade plastics, food grade glass, office and newspaper, and cardboard. If we were to get all of those in to the recycle bin instead of into the trash, we'd probably be recycling twice as much as we are, even without trying to get creative on the other things that would go in there.
Wow, that's a huge difference.
Yeah, and it's difficult. I mean, what the industry has done over time is they made it very convenient for the process. So when they went to single stream recycling, for example, they allowed all the different varieties of recyclables to go into one bin. That allowed the haulers to go out with swing arm trucks where there's only one driver instead of two, and they just take whatever's in that bin. In doing so, what they've done is they've taken the responsibility for the accuracy and put it on the homeowner. And getting the word out to all those people that A, you're responsible for this, and B, how to do it correctly is a pretty heavy lift, to be honest with you.
It's a big challenge.
It is.
Well, one exciting thing that I'm really excited about, the work that you're doing and some of the innovative solutions that we've tried with recycling. There's different challenges with that, but according to research, it's something like 22% of this trash that we're shipping out of state right now is actually able to be composted.
Yes. So around 22% of the municipal solid waste that's processed. So it's not only 22% of what we're sending out of state, but it's also 22% of what we're incinerating in state is organic material, basically food waste. And probably the lowest hanging fruit in correcting our issue of a lack of capacity is going after food waste. And we would do that in a couple of ways. There's a hierarchy when we look at food waste that considers the best use, both environmentally and financially, for what to do about waste. In the case of food waste, the number one thing you do is, if you have more, well, first you don't make waste. You eat what you have, or you order. If you're a restaurant, you order with the intent of not having a lot of extra. But if you do have extra, you divert that to food banks or people that are in need, rather than disposing of it at all. Save that, the next tier of that would be to send it to for animal feed, which there is some of that here. There's a couple of pig farms that actually take a fair amount of food waste from some of our schools, and so that's put back into the food system that way. Beyond that, then it would be a matter of composting or using anaerobic digestion, two different methods, where you take the food waste and instead of incinerating it, you break it down, basically you rot it. And in the case of aerobic processing, which is something that SCRRRA is looking at, that's composting, you would turn that into a soil amendment that you can use instead of man-made fertilizers. In the case of anaerobic digestion, it's a different process, as it suggests. Anaerobic is without air. It's done in large vessels. And in that process, they can extract methane from the materials. They send that through some machinery and generate electricity from it. And then the balance of the digestate, they call it, the small amount of material that's left can then be added to compost. So, you're taking, and really, again, using the definition of recycling, you're recycling food. So you're taking a product that is one thing, the food, and you're turning it into something else, which is either electricity or a really good soil amendment. So that's what we're trying to do, and we're working on a project right now to divert a significant amount of waste for our 12 towns. And we believe that we can do this at about half the cost it takes to send it to a waste energy facility and incinerate it.
So it's basically taking something that people would consider as trash, something with no value, a lot of this organic waste, and then turning it into something that would likely have value, whether it's great fertilizer or energy.
Absolutely, and it's great you talk about the value, because it's my background before I got into this was in logistics. I worked in trucking, warehousing, import, export, moving stuff around basically. And in the case of solid waste, you're talking about a commodity that has virtually no intrinsic value. It's not worth anything. So every mile that you move that is a complete cost, and it's a complete waste, which was what makes it so insidious that we're sending this material hundreds of miles away just to bury it in the ground. So yes, it's the whole idea with solid waste is you deal with it locally, and you do it in the most environmentally friendly way you can. And if there's a way to do that less expensively, like composting, that's at the top of our list.
That's awesome. And it makes me think, growing up, we always used to take our banana peels or the apple cores and vegetables after we cut them and put them out in the backyard, and then we would kind of turn over the soil and do the composting that way. And what you're talking about now is with the 12-member towns, doing it on a much larger scale with a lot more organic waste.
Yes, so we're designing a facility that one built out in its current design would manage about 7,500 tons of food waste material a year. We would mix that food waste with wood mulch that we already generate from our wood grinding operation, and we actually spend a lot of money hauling that away because it doesn't have a good market value. A lot of it is used by local residents in towns, but an awful lot of it gets shipped off, more than we can use in the compost facility. So we can take that wood waste, we mix it with the food waste, we apply air to it, keep it moist, and that accelerates, number one, it accelerates the composting process. So once we mix those materials together, we apply air to it for about 2 weeks. We mix it again, apply air for another 2 weeks, at which point essentially all the food is broken down, and we can take the resulting now compost, put it into windrows or long piles that we allow age, and after another 3 to 4 months, you've got material that is great for farming and gardening and whatnot. So it's adding the air and the moisture to the process with the right amount of carbon, which is the wood, the right amount of nitrogen, which is the food. It accelerates the microbes that are already in the food to get active and create it. And what's another thing that's different about a commercial scale is that you can compost a much broader variety of food waste. So in a home compost bin, you're really pretty much restricted to vegetable peels, fruit peels, things like that. In a commercial scale, meat, bones, oils, all of those items can go in there. And at the end of the day, when the compost is finished, the nutritional value of that compost is reflective of the broad base of materials you put in to begin with. So what goes into that pile of food waste to begin will end up at the end of it being in the compost. So having the meat and bones in there, the protein structures and some of the other things that are in there, you end up with a really highly nutritious, very valuable product.
That's exciting. And I'm a little curious how the whole makeup of this will work. Is it something that the 12-member townspeople will drive over and deliver their waste to you, or will there be collection? Do you have any idea on how that might work?
Oh yeah, we've had a number of haulers come to us already. We're going to take a broad approach with this to begin with. It'll be a combination of drop-off points for food waste, as well as curbside collection for residents, collection, hauling collection from larger commercial entities like schools, restaurants, convention centers, maybe the casinos will want to be involved. So it's really a combination of both, and the trick is, and what our theory is, if we take the cost of the composting down low enough, that can help offset some of the cost of the collection, and we can still get this accomplished with a more environmentally friendly outcome at the same or a lower price. That's what we're trying to do.
Mm-hmm. That you have the business background and you're able to really push that to make it economically feasible, both short term as well as long term.
That's certainly what we're hoping. I mean, we're the authority. Our position is going to be, we want to build it, we want to own it. We currently have a request for qualifications out for somebody that'll run it, and our interest is in engaging with a company that can both do the hauling as well as the compost manufacture, and including the sale of the product. And the reason we want to do that is a lot of it's depending on proper source separation up front, just like curbside recycling. Mm-hmm. So you don't want to have plastic bags or cups or disposable utensils and those kinds of things mixed in with the mix. It's not going to compost, and you have to remove it. So the better the sortation on the front end, the better product you're going to have on the back end. The one entity in the whole process that is customer facing is the hauler. So they're really, really important in this whole process. They're the ones that are picking it up. They're the ones that can see if there's a problem, where it is, so that we can get in and address that and try to get the proper sortation done. If they're also responsible for selling the finished product, our intent is to incentivize them to move as much product through as they can, but to make the highest value product and the best compost that we can make. Therefore, they're incentivized to, number one, move the volume through for us, but also to make really good compost. You have a quality control component right from the beginning to end, and we're trying to build that into our relationship with whoever we bring in. We're doing that process now. The design for the facility is complete. The zoning for the facility is complete. We own the land, so that's complete. It's right next to the Preston waste to energy facility, so it's an easy accessory use to the existing process there. We have our permit in with DEEP right now, and we're hopeful to get that very soon. And once we've done that and we pick our operator, we'll be putting out an RFP for construction, final design and construction. And once we get to that stage, we're going to engage all the residents in all the towns with a significant outreach program to try to drive interest and drive participation in the program.
That's amazing, and I really don't want us to understate how profound this could be for the entire region, for the state. Just really want to reiterate that this is potentially about 22% of the trash that we have right now could be going to this new composting facility and creating value with dollars that we can put back into the local economy and do something with it. So it could be huge.
No question. And there are even some other kind of side benefits to this. There are a couple of pilot programs going on right now for food waste collection. I happen to live in Ledyard, and the town of Ledyard has a program where you can drop off food waste at the transfer station, and I opted into that right away. So my dog Bo and I go up every Saturday. It's our big treat for the week to go up and drop off our food waste. And what I've found is that because I'm pulling the food out, my trash doesn't smell. And I literally, it's my wife and I and our dog, we have a 60-gallon container, which is a pretty standard curbside container, we put our container out every 3 to 4 weeks because it doesn't smell and we don't fill it that much.
So you're saving time and energy taking your trash out, saving
It's all
bags,
good.
all these things.
It's all good.
Lots of wins there. And
Yeah, it is.
I'm really curious, Dave, if there are any other examples of similar projects that you know of, whether it's in Connecticut or New England, that are doing similar composting projects. Have you seen similar projects?
There are some projects going on. The state's really been pushing this. They've had a couple of grant programs, and they've had a fair amount of participation with that. There is in the state right now a very large food waste anaerobic digester in Southington, run by Quantum Biopower, very successful, does a great job. But that's really the only major facility. There are some composting facilities, some commercial composting facilities in different parts of the state, but nothing of the scale that we're talking about. And you know, when you do the math and you look at how large the trash problem is, what we really need is large infrastructure to really be able to move the needle there. So there's a lot of interesting things going on. There's a lot being done on the collection side. Among other things they're trying to do to reduce the trash volume. But I think in the coming years you're going to see a number of projects popping up. Ours just happens to be one of the first ones.
That's amazing. And I think it's also cool to really point out that you do a lot with education. You touched a little bit on schools, but you educate, you get out into the community, you have talks, you're really trying to educate and share this knowledge with the community. And if we're sharing this with the next generation, people might start growing up and living that compost is just a normal part of their trash.
Right.
And that could be a profound change.
The process has been around for thousands of years,
Yeah.
So it's not something new that we've come up with. I think taking it to a commercial scale is certainly a recent development. But yeah, it's an old method. I think it's something that I think hopefully it's going to be grasped well here in the state. And if we focus on a number of things, I think we really can reduce that shortfall we have in the trash volume. The food waste is the easiest. There's some other things the state's looking into as well, and we're quite frankly going to be exercising all of those things because you know, we have a wonderful situation right now. We have a 10-year contract for our solid waste. It lasts through 2030. We have a very favorable price compared to the rest of the state. I mean, we were kind of comparable to the rest of the state, but when Hartford closed and the capacity was constrained, supply and demand, the price in the state has skyrocketed. Because of our contract, we've been able to maintain that level that we were at several years ago, and we're going to be able to maintain that till 2030. We're not kidding ourselves. We know that when that contract expires, we're going to be subject to market prices. So where today, you know, we're paying $75 or in that range, in 2031, you know, we fully expect to be, we're projecting $135, $145 a ton. So literally doubling the cost. And that's where the market is now. So our job as a forward-thinking organization is to take that time, take the resources that we have, and try to build out the infrastructure to soften that blow when we get there in 2030.
Great. And we're just running out of time here now, but how could people find out more about SCRRRA, be in touch with you, and support all this great work that you're doing? Anything that you want to share on that?
Well, we're trying to do some more outreach on a number of fronts. Cleaning up recycling is certainly one of them. Everybody's going to hear a lot from us about food waste when that project gets going. But I invite anyone to come look at our website, www.SCRRRA.org. It's very vibrant. We've just redone it. There's a lot of educational material in there. We have legislative trackers if you want to see what the state's doing in the solid waste front. The other thing we're doing is we're enhancing our outreach. We're getting a lot more involved. We're developing a lot of short, like 15-second clips that can go out on social media that'll be good education. And I'd invite all of our residents to come to any of our household hazardous waste collections. We have 9 a year. They're free to the public, and we get the worst of the worst out of the system through that process, and I encourage everyone to take advantage of it.
Awesome. Well, Dave, thank you so much for all that you're doing for the community and taking time out of your busy schedule to join us today.
Hey, anytime. I enjoy this very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you.